This week on the Footy Mailbag, we're joined by Mini Monk from the coaches panel. We discuss the new DPPs added to Supercoach. We discuss what to do with the likes of Finn Callaghan. And as always, we answer all your questions. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Footy Mailbag. I am hosting this week. It is me, Clarky, your favourite host who is also called Clarky. And joining me as always is the one and only Damo.
It's me, Damo, who's not hosting, You're
also not the only Damien.
Am I the other...
You might be the best Damo, but you're not the only Damo. I've got a corner on the market at the moment. Now, Damo, we always like to bring in guests here on the Mailbag, and this week we have one of the great ones. We have the wonderful Mini Monk, who you might know from the coaches panel and just generally being a AFL fantasy and Supercoach guru out on X and all of his good platforms. Thank you for joining us, Mini.
Thank you. As far as I'm aware, I'm the only Mini Monk, but as people who might be watching the video may notice, I am not the only Fremantle fan on this podcast. So, Damo, we are outnumbering Clarky 2-1.
Yeah, I was going to say, against my better senses, because Damo asked me who we should get for this episode, and I had a few people in mind, and he mentioned your name, and I was like, absolutely. And in hindsight, this was not the week to get both Freo fans that are in my life. Sorry, two of the three Freo fans in my life together to talk about football.
Why is that, Clarky?
I'm actually going to the game this weekend on Saturday. 1:20, where Melbourne are taking on Fremantle. I will be going. I'm hoping to go. Obviously, we've got a little one, so plans can change. But I'm hoping to go with co-host of the Falcon, Cass, who's also notable Freo supporter, because you guys only get like 3 games in Melbourne a year, if that. So may as well go and get a win, right?
And sit with all the other 15,000 people who might turn up.
Yeah, and good. And none of us will be sat on the camera side, so the MCG looks empty. That's the best way to do it. Now, Minnie, how is your Supercoach season going this year? How are you tracking? Have you feel like you've got a hot start, or have you been building into it?
I've had a reasonably hot start. It would be a lot hotter if I hadn't made the silly decision to once again start Tom Stewart in my team. He gets me every year, and I hate it. But I'm ranked inside the top 1,000, which at round 5 is a good spot to be in.
Oh, that's so hot of a start. I'm actually sweating here in Melbourne. That's a fantastic. I mean, I don't think you should disparage yourself for starting a man that you clearly have the most faith in all of sports, in all of the AFL, because Tom Stewart he's one of those names that I think you see when you're picking your team and you go, Safety. This feels good. This feels right. He feels like home.
He's going to be cheap again for 2026, right? I'm going to get sucked in again.
This was like that time where I think I started Josh Kelly for 3 years in a row and it never panned out. Now, Minnie, what moves do you think that you're going to be making this week? Do you feel like it's time? Are you looking at upgrading? Are you still working on cash generation? What's your plans for round 6?
I mean, trying to hit 2 birds with one stone, get some better rookies in and try and get an upgrade in. So I'm probably going to cash in 1 or 2 decent rookies and maybe a dead rookie in someone like a Henderson, and pick up the 2 obvious rookies this week in Tom Gross and my brain is going absolutely terribly. Caden Cleary, that's the one. Yep. And try and get some sort of an upgrade in, probably Connor Rosie at sub 500k with a new lease on life on halfback.
I love that. Is that so? We like to do a thing that I clued you up in just before we hit the record button, but we like to talk about what caught our eye this week. So I think this is probably a good place to jump off. Is Connor Rosie something that caught your eye this week, or what caught your eye around the football world for Supercoach this week?
He definitely did catch my eye off of halfback. I think that's something that wasn't expected, but it makes sense given his junior pedigree. The actual thing that caught my eye is just how much faith both Essendon and Richmond are putting in some of their defender rookies, namely in Zach Reed and Luke Traynor. They are not just your typical key defenders or medium defenders where they're being used for their ability to defend. They're actually being trusted with distribution of the ball. And because of that, I think that there's probably a lot to ride out in terms of running them as rookies in our defensive line and also in cash generation. So that's one that I'm very much keeping an eye on for the next 3 to 4 weeks.
It's so weird, Damo, because I remember we definitely had discussions early on. We were like, where are the defensive rookies going to come when we need to cash these guys out? Why do we have to start 2 Essendon defensive rookies? When can Luke Traynor be traded, please? And then he had that massive spike game like, oh, I never want him to leave now because he seems to be averaging 80. Are you planning on riding these guys? Are you fielding some of these guys now, Damo?
Yeah, I've got Bice, Trainer, and Reed all on field at the moment. So that's very fun because I know that there's a day that they might only score about 40 or 50 points, but their break even is so low that we're still going to make money. And thanks to the flex position, their poor score might drop out of your final round score anyway, because a lot of people are into upgrade season or getting into upgrade season. So eventually those scores won't really matter and those guys might graduate to being more of a bench backup until they can move them on a bit later. But yeah, like it's been a slow burn for the rookie defenders for us, and now it's turning into they're the most reliable ones that we've got, and we're moving out our midfielders.
That's what, this is actually a really perfect time for me to segue. And what caught my eye this week is the discourse around it's upgrade season. I don't want to sound like an old man, because I've not been playing Supercoach nearly as long as some of the fine people that I have the opportunity to rub shoulders with. But I remember upgrade season used to happen probably a little bit later in the year. And it used to be a heavy focus on cash generation and maintaining economy. But because of the 40 trade that we have, it feels like aggression seems to be coming from all angles. Now, are you both firmly in the belief that it's now or never for upgrade season?
It's not now or never, but I think people should start to think about it. And I think the reason that people have cash available is because we had these options like a Matty Roberts and Adam Chera, Caleb Daniel, Jack McRae, those sorts who are putting up premium type numbers that have allowed us to not spend elsewhere. And so we've seen people who were fixing their teams while it was best 18, while all those opening round teams had those buys, but we've seen people come out of those buys with 200-300k in the bank and have just been able to go bang, bang, bang and upgrade, positions at will. And so upgrade season, I think, depends on how your team looks and the structure of your team to begin with. And luckily for some people, they're already up to their, second, third upgrade, because there's guys like Tom Stewart that we'll talk about a bit later and some other guys that are going to be very, very cheap and can pull out, those 105s, 110s, even higher than that sort of numbers on a weekly basis.
That's something that terrifies me about bringing in the guys and quote unquote upgrading, because it feels like I need to be absolutely certain that these people are going to be hitting it for the rest of the year. And it feels both like it's been a long time and a short time, it being round 5 just finishing. What sort of criteria do you have when you're considering your upgrades for these guys that you want to bring in permanently?
I think they have to fall into a couple of different categories depending on what their price is. We really want to be looking at players that are going to be at that top 6/top 8/top 2 ruckman of their line from now until the buys, and hopefully from then onwards, or close enough to it, or they've got to present enough value that they just become undisputable as an option. If you can get someone who's around that 500k marker that can match it with the top tier guys and potentially has, like the round 15 or round 16 buy, that's someone I'm really wanting to consider this week, rather than spending up to that 600k type guy who, I'm guaranteed that they're going to be a top 8 midfielder or a top 6 defender, but it stagnates me to be able to get the trade that I want to get next week. And I think that you're talking about it before, those teams that have been able to get 2 and maybe coming into their 3rd upgrade this week, they're teams that have actually picked up those guys at that cheaper price, not only, just to start off with in their starting teams, but they're also picking them up off the trade tables in these next few weeks as well.
Damo, what's caught your eye this week?
I was luckily the AFL app tracks interchanges and when players are on and off the field. And there was a few players that, we have question marks over that we're going to talk about in a little while. And I just noticed bench time and time that they are on the bench within a game was just a bit odd, and spending a bit more time on the bench than you would have liked. And I know it was hot over in Adelaide during gather round, but it just feels like these players are players that, you've put a lot of money into at these clubs, especially a couple of the names that we're going to talk to. And then you have them on the bench for a large portion of the quarters, and that is almost stagnating their production for our Supercoach teams. And I know the interchange is such a strange thing to catch my eye, but I'd always go, oh, this team's got all the momentum. Everyone's getting a touch. Everyone's gone up by like 20, 30 points. Where's this guy? What's this guy's score at? And he'll have the little bench symbol next to his name. And it's like, great. He missed out on all of that.
It's really, there's actually nothing worse, I think, than going, I wonder what's happening to my player, opening the AFL app and then seeing that dreaded interchange and the red bar next to you, like, okay, they've been off the ground. You see it, the timer slowly. I think the timer next to the interchange is probably the worst function that has ever been added, because I'm like, I don't want to know. It makes me sad.
It's the most painful one for fantasy coaches, because you just see it ticking up minute by minute and you're just thinking, get them on. Get them on. When are you getting on?
It's really tough. And, Minnie, I know that we don't talk a lot about the other platform here on the Footy Mailbag, but I think I'd be remiss in not asking an expert in both, like yourselves, a two-way player, we'll say. True. I learned that baseball term this week, and I'm really glad that I've gotten to use it. Do you find that there's a lot of crossover in your trade planning between the two, or do the wires get crossed sometimes between the differences in scoring and the differences in picking up players?
The differences in scoring tends not to be too dramatic. You just get really big ceiling scores out of players in Supercoach, which can make price swings a bit more dramatic. In terms of trading, the cadence is obviously a lot faster in Supercoach now with the boosts. They really help you to be able to force upgrades, and especially early on in the season, to pluck these guys off week after week, whereas in AFL Fantasy, it's a lot harder to. But it starts to diverge, I think, about from this week, because, all the rookies tend to be the same early on. All the mid prices tend to be the same early on. But now when you're trying to really target these premiums that have dropped 50, 100K, potentially have had a roll shift, you might have one in one format and not in the other, or the price might be right in one format and not in the other. And that's when you've got to try and decide which way to go in all the formats and not get that mixed across.
It's funny. I don't think you don't really know. In my head, it was always like, okay, they're both just numbers games in a sense. And then the last few years, I've been involved in a reasonably serious, ongoing AFL fantasy league, and I've kind of learning the differences in what makes both formats great has been such a pleasure, because I feel so out of touch with AFL fantasy when I'm having a good time in Supercoach, and then vice versa. I think last year I was having a bit of a rough time with Supercoach, but things were flying in AFL fantasy, so it's nice to hedge my bets. But we'll start talking about the biggest addition to Supercoach this week. New DPPs, Damo. Take us through it. What happened?
I won't go through the whole list, because there was 70 names that got DPPs in this most recent update, and some of the most notable names were Chad Warner is now a forward, Christian Petrarca is now a forward, Harry Sheasel got midfield eligibility, which we knew that was going to happen at the beginning of the year. Jack McRae got midfield eligibility, again another one that's no surprise. Same with Isaac Rankin, but then we were lucky enough to get rookies like Levi Ashcroft get forward eligibility, and then Sam Davidson, who's on a way out for a lot of teams this week anyway, but now he's got the added DPP, and now which has made people think twice about perhaps moving him this week and waiting, because they've got that flexibility. So yeah, some really relevant names have got DPP, and I'm sure I've missed someone who's even more relevant than those guys that I've mentioned, but it's making trade plans a lot different, and people are thinking about different things now that these players can be picked up in different positions.
I was going to say a couple of other really relevant ones is Connor Stone picking up defender forward status, which is one of the most valuable ones in the game. I think Finn O'Sullivan also picking up defender status for those who still own is quite nice. And I might throw in a Nick Martin, who now also has the defender forward status, as someone to just keep a very small eye on.
And I've seen people looking at Sam Draper now that he's got forward eligibility and no Nick Bryan.
Sam Draper with forward eligibility sounds so fun. And I'd be lying if I said that wasn't one of the most interesting, where I'm like, is there a world? The answer is obviously no.
No, the answer is obviously yes. But the question is, how much do you want to torture yourself?
Yeah. And I'm already a Melbourne fan, so I think I'm capped out right now. So,
I mean, my team is close to being in the bin. Once my team is like in the bin, like proper in the bin, down the bottom, got to use a pressure hose to get it off, maybe that's when I trade in Sam Draper.
Yeah, hey, you never know. How much is Mark of the Year worth in Supercoach points? That gets added onto his total points right at the end of the season. Kind of a bit like counting the Mario stars at the end of the game.
It gets multiplied for every week you've owned him as well.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's perfect. I love defender forwards, and Cornerstone getting it the week after I traded out Ben Payton is so much fun. It feels so good. But the flexibility that this allows, like you said, Damo, it's really helped people come up with really interesting and augmented trade plans just by moving the pieces around the board, doing their best Bevo impressions. Sonny's not included. Who are probably the biggest targets that you guys have with the new DPP? Minnie, I'll start with you.
I think it'd be remiss to not include the most obvious option, which is Christian Petrarca. We know his pedigree, especially in Supercoach. He's a fantastic scorer. He is a fantastic player. Eventually, Melbourne have to turn it around, be it by actually winning games or by sacking a coach, whichever comes first, who knows?
They have to turn it around, but not this week.
But not this week.
Yeah.
Absolutely not this week.
We also have to hire a CEO, don't forget. Somewhere in between all of those things.
Yes, absolutely. That also needs to be done. But even despite how poor he has looked and how poor Melbourne has looked, he's still found a way to be able to scrape together somewhat reasonable scores. I mean, his lowest score of the year is a 78. And if that ends up being your F6 getting a floor score in any given week, putting out a 78, you're probably not really complaining about that. And for someone who, you know, has the potential to do stretches of 120, 125, that's the one that perks my eye straight away.
This is the thing. We know Christian Petrarca is mostly a good option for Supercoach formats because he is a moments player as well. So these spike games have to come because so much is resting on him, even if it's purely so that he can drive his own trade value up. So when he eventually goes to, anyway.
We didn't say it. You said it. We didn't say it.
I think I completely agree with you. I think this week you could pick him up at 483. Right? Give or take. His break even is 101. It says 0% likelihood of getting that because historically, according to the Supercoach Plus notes, he scores 76 and not well against Fremantle. But also, I think there's a world where he reaches 101 quite easily, depending on the game script, depending on which Melbourne turns up. Like if it's the Melbourne that had that flashing quarter 3 against Essendon, then okay, hang on, we're onto something here. Christian could kick 3 goals and rack up 20 disposals. If he gets too much attention and is kind of shut down, then he drops a little bit lower. But really, for 480 for a guy who has that kind of ceiling, I don't think there's as much risk in that. We're talking before about how you got to pick these guys when they're low and then ride them out. If you bring him in and it doesn't pan out, Minnie, one of the best advice that your fellow co-hosts over at the coaches panel, the big dog MJ, he always drilled into me one of the best pieces of advice, which is the parachute. Make sure that you know what your exit strategy is for if something doesn't pan out, because if you're not thinking far enough ahead, then that's when you get caught out and you're sort of scrambling for those resolutions. So bring him in with caution because he could rise or fall this week, but he's still relatively cheap for someone with DPP. Damo, tell me who's caught your eye.
Chad Warner has a break even of 163 and he's already under 500k. He is a guy who, a little bit like Christian Petrarca, he's probably a little bit more volatile with his scoring, but when he has big games, they are huge because he's got the ability to burst out of packs and hit the scoreboard, but also be a center clearance guy and rack up the footy, get 25 plus touches. He's not afraid of a tackle. Like he probably sits in a similar boat to Christian Petrarca, where he can have a 120 averaging run over like a 3 to 5 game period. And I think he's another guy that people are going to want to squeeze into their teams. And it might be the case that your M8 is actually a dual position mid forward this year.
Flex, baby.
Or your flex, yeah.
Play the song demo.
I'm not playing that song ever again.
The song is dead. Long live the song.
It's on our TikTok if people really want to listen to it.
I love that. I do like the Chad. I've always been a big fan of the Chad. I just don't know what's going on with Sydney, because I know that we're here to talk about Supercoach, but I'm perplexed.
I'm not sure Sydney's so much the issue. His price is driven down really because of that one game, and it came out after the game that he was quite heavily managed because he'd been sick that week. And that's actually why they even subbed him out. It's just because, the game was gone. They had North Melbourne already roasted, and they just said, give him the rest he needs. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's just still feeling the effects of it. Last week at Gather Round, especially in the heat, this week he could easily turn around, and then the break even's going to drop pretty quickly after that 40 odds falls out of his 3-round average.
Who else have we got our eye on, gentlemen? I'll open up to the floor now.
Josh Dacos.
Love that. Absolutely love that.
I mean, it's pretty clear they need a distributor off their halfback flank alongside of Dan Houston, and he was doing enough that it deserved a Braden Campbell tag this week. So again, 2 weeks' time, that score falls out of his 3-round average. I think he might be one that is a very cheap upgrade to get onto that could be potentially a top 6 defender.
When will they leave the Dacosses alone?
When they stop being so bloody good at football.
Imagine tracing the greatness of football back to one genetic line in one team. Anyone else for your money, Damo?
I'm just having a look through the list now because there's a lot of names, like 70 players. I did not expect 70 players to get dual position. Do we wind back the clock and bring in Patrick Dangerfield? No,
we do not.
Absolutely not.
Probably not. Am I being dumb and thinking that Harley Reid as a def mid might be an okay idea?
Okay, I don't want to call you dumb because that's mean, but I also think
I'm just calling out names, just going through the list. I'm going to be honest.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say maybe not so much. I'd rather bring in Ryan Marrick now with Jeremy McGovern as a test.
I think we've gone through the most relevant names, to be honest.
Perfect. We can move on to the what the hell do I do with the segment of this podcast. And I'm going to start with the player that I have of the 3 names that I've got here. What do we do with Matt Roberts? What is to be done about Matthew Roberts? Because
he's fine.
He's fine.
He's fine. He is
you just
fine.
don't trade.
You just don't trade. See, that's. But what if I want to trade?
He went at 55% disposal efficiency in the first half against Collingwood. And he also gave away 2 free kicks, I think.
And he also had the double clanger insufficient intent kick, which was a bad call to start off with. And also the fact that it's a double clanger is also bad. Yeah.
So he only needed to go at an extra 10% disposal efficiency in that first half, not get pinged for insufficient of intent. And then he probably gets to about 90 points, and that would have been fine, and no one would be talking about this. So I think he's just and the game against Collingwood, even though they both didn't reach 90, it showed that they can both operate together and be okay. Matt Roberts, I think, even came into a stoppage at one point and forced the ball forward in a really impressive bit of play. So I think they're working out that both of them can work in that Sydney defense.
Jesus, they're handing out licenses, like pen licenses over at the Swans.
Yeah, I don't think that. I think people are conflating Bice's impact on Roberts more than it actually is affecting him. I think that they'd like the ball in Roberts' hands. I like the ball in Bice's hands. I like the ball in Blakey's hands. And there's enough ball to go around for them.
perfectly level-headed argument, gentlemen. Still yeet him. No, that's what do we do with Clayton Oliver? I
Nothing.
also think that he is a
Also nothing.
Yeah.
Also nothing. Simple.
I think Melbourne are playing poorly. Clayton Oliver is a volume possession getter, and when Melbourne's not working, the amount of efficient disposals is just not there right now. Whatever's happening will eventually come good one way or another, but you have bigger issues. If you're reliant on getting rid of these mid-price guys to make up the cash to do an upgrade, you're still do the math on how many points you're actually getting once you trade out Oliver, who has a ceiling, has a pedigree, and who you're bringing in.
Much like Petrarca, Oliver also has a very friendly fixture after this week in West Coast and Richmond in back-to-back weeks. If you're trading a player before those 2 weeks, that feels like a bad idea.
Gentlemen, what do we do with Finn Callahan?
Abort.
All right. Okay. All right. I am
That's good.
I am a Finn Callahan believer.
Oh no,
And
Damo.
You're a truther.
And if I cast your mind back 15 minutes ago, maybe even less than that, what caught my eye was Finn Callahan's time on the bench. Not how long he was on the bench, just when he was on the bench. And it might not be a coincidence that GWS looked better when he was on the bench, but I think he's not being used properly. I think he needs to go to the bench at different times, because there were moments where the Giants were like Harlem globetrotting the ball around St Kilda, and Callahan was on the bench with a drink bottle in his hand. And I don't think what we saw at opening round is a flash in the pan. I think he's going to do that again soon. I think he's fine. I think he's fine to hold. Maybe you jump off him later, but for now, I think he's fine.
Look, I was probably a bit blasé when I said abort. He has done okay outside of that Hawthorn game where he got a lot of attention in that game and did cop the tag. My concern with him is that he is not the number one midfielder in that team, and he's also the number one tag target in that team. And you combine those two factors together, it's not a recipe for success.
Yeah, I'm Damo. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to side with the other Fremantle fan on this podcast and align with Minnie, where I think this is probably one of those situations where I think it's kind of just a perfect storm where for there to be too much in the way for him to achieve his potential. I'm not saying that he doesn't have the potential. I'm saying that there's obstacles that I'm not sure he can overcome.
One thing I will say about Finn Callahan is if it doesn't happen this year, his move into, a 105 plus averaging midfielder, I genuinely think it's coming. I genuinely think that time is coming. We might have gone a year early on him.
I can completely agree with that. I think he has all the potential to become a very clear top 8 midfielder in Supercoach. Just don't know when. And I just don't think it's this year.
Yeah. Gentlemen, what do we do with Bailey Humphries?
Yeet him into the sun.
Who? Do you mean Bailey Humphrey?
Yeah, that's who I meant. Who was I thinking of?
I don't know. I think you're combining Bailey Humphrey and Lawson Humphreys. There are two.
Yeah. There you go.
He has Richmond this week. I would not be trading.
I agree with that, despite wanting to trade him really bad.
I can completely understand that, but he has had 2 mediocre scores. But if he saves you from a rookie score in that position, is it the end of the world? I mean, Richmond this week is lovely for someone of his playing potential. Forward of the ball, kicks goals, plenty of scaling to go around if he gets involved early.
Yeah, and a break even of 69
Nice.
Yeah,
is
good.
Is perfectly acceptable, I think, to take that risk on. You'll probably have bigger issues this week or other rookies to get rid of. Now, do either of you have any submissions to the what do we do with segment?
Can I throw in a what do we do with Tristan Cherry?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
He damaged it. He played through a tight hamstring, let's call it, against Adelaide. He barely trained in the lead up to the following game against Sydney. and then he still had awareness in the game against Jared Witts, who is one of the most restrictive rucks in the league this year so far.
Yes.
I think he is fine. I think he's going to be fine.
My concern harkens back to the points that you were making about benchings, and the last 2 weeks, he has spent the last 10 minutes of the game parked on the bench. To me, that's the signs that a player isn't fine and that they might still be carrying something. So
I didn't say he was fine. I said he's going to be fine.
he's going to be fine. Sure. Sure.
All right.
Is that before or after the rest?
Well, after the rest.
Hey, I'm not a
traditionally.
doctor.
Traditionally, after a rest is when you feel best. I would say if you're going to do something with him, the only person you can trade him to is Tom DeConnick.
Is it though?
I just think that he's far and away without Mackay as well doing any pinch hitting. Does Pitney come in and maybe? But I think Tom DeConnick, they still want him to be the number one guy, and by reducing his role, I think Carlton really run the risk of him taking that mega St Kilda deal.
This is the type of player where I get the AF and SC side of me's fighting, because Tom DeConnick did not have a good week in AFL Fantasy this week, and he had quite a good week in Supercoach. And to me, I look at his game and think he was lucky to score 118 Supercoach. I would be very cautious if that's the player that I was trading someone like Tristan Cherry to. I think that both Gawn and Kieran Briggs represent options either for potential ceiling or potential value, and would probably be leaning to one of those if you were looking to move Cherry. But I do agree, while Cherry is still being named and is playing for North Melbourne, he is a hold.
Excellent. We'll move on to...
I guess it moves on to the next point. Sorry, Clark, I'm going to take over for a second here.
Okay. It's fine.
Do we think we know who the best midfielders and rucks are going to be? Because Hugh McCluggage is not going to be the number one midfielder this year.
No?
Really?
Or do we actually think that he will be?
No.
Yeah, no.
I'm being slightly
I think he's got potential. In this world where I feel like I've noticed this year that because the tag's back and people, it's kind of coming back into vogue, which means that it's going to be one of these second or third midfielders that you kind of don't think of first, I reckon, will be in the top six. Not Hugh McCluggage, just to be clear, not specifically Hugh McCluggage, but I think it's going to be one of those guys like a Dunkley or, you know, a Brayshaw, yeah. These guys who are, you know, not the top guy because the top guy gets all the attention.
I think I tend to agree. I agree, though, that McCluggage he's got a good head start, but I would be shocked to see him as a top 8 midfielder from now until the end of the year. I also don't think George Hewitt's going to be a top 8 midfielder from here until the end of the year. I don't think that Tuke Miller is going to be a top 8 midfielder from here until the end of the year. There's quite a few that have popped their heads up early and have shown that they can clearly score quite well. I would say we maybe know half of them. I'd say it's pretty safe that Dunkley will be there. I think Brayshaw has shown enough to say that he will be there. I think Butter's scoring pedigree says that he should be there as well. I think Zach Merritt's scoring pedigree shows that he will be there as well. I
think Max Holmes is probably a really good shout for being a top mid this year.
Max Holmes?
Yeah, despite the DPP.
Cheating.
I would much rather pick him in my defensive line.
Yeah.
And I'm not quite as confident that he is a top 6 defender.
Okay. That's fair. Damo, do you think you know?
Damo,
who's the number one ruck going to be? Is it Max Gawn? It's Max Gawn, right?
I genuinely have no idea. This is why I put this on the run sheet. I genuinely have no idea.
I think the boxes are so much harder.
I'm looking at the ruck line, and if I sort by average, it is Tom DeConnick at the top. He's probably not going to be the number one. Well, actually, he might be if he wants a nice payday to stay at Carlton. The next guy on the list is Luke Jackson, who is injured, but also won't average that much ever again for this year because Sean Darcy is now fit and in the team. Darcy Cameron. Look, there's a case to be made that Darcy Cameron could potentially be a top ruck this year because out of contract free agent, I think he's a free agent, he's looking for a payday. Who knows if he's even at Collingwood next year. He wants the best deal possible. He could play out of his skin. Max Gawn has had a good few weeks. Sorry, yeah?
I would just put the flag on Darcy Cameron that his average is inflated by basically rucking 3/4 of a game against Lockie Keefe.
Very true.
Yeah.
Max Gawn is always going to be in the mix. Jared Witts, he was number 3 last year, so he's there's a chance. Tristan Sherry is, despite what we've been talking about, is still 6th in average. So I know it's inflated by a couple of early scores, but he's still doing okay. And then you got the likes of Meek, Nank, Grundy, Jordan Sweet is there. Tim English has not had the year that he wants so far. It's so difficult to pinpoint who's going to be in the top 4 to 6 rucks this year.
So you're saying that Sam DeConnick still has a chance?
Where is he? He is 17th with an average of 76. So no.
Yeah. I think that it's a year where the gap might narrow for the first bit. And, as we get into winter, we get more stoppages, we get more chances for rucks to dominate the game. It gets a bit wetter. Some of them get their hands on contested marks like Cherry, like Witts, like TDK, like Gawn. But it might only be that instead of them going at 130 at the top, they might only be going at the 115 to 120 marker. I think in the preseason, we're all loving the idea of flex and saying, yes, I can pick 3 ruckmen. I can pick all of Gawn, Cherry, and TDK, and Marshall. And now it's just like, I might just want the 2. And if one of them gets injured, I might just play with 22 instead of 23 on any given week. Who knows yet? But I think at this point, if you're mucking around in your ruck line, it's because you have concerns about your ruck dramatically, that they're injured, or you are someone who owns Matt Flynn and you are praying that he comes back in, and it doesn't look like he is anytime soon for some reason.
Perfect. We'll talk about the rookies very briefly. Now, the bubble rookies that we have flagged, Damo's put together the 4 names that are probably the closest to the top of the pile, which is Tom Gross, Saad El Hawley, Caden Cleary? Yeah, Caden Cleary and Sandy Prock, who I thought was a V8 supercar driver. Who are we picking for the rookies on the bubble this week? Who is our number 1? Caden Cleary.
Boost and pick up Gross and Cleary.
Does that help you, Clarky?
No.
Do you have to only pick one?
I don't think so. I think it depends on whether you're wanting to boost or not. I'm on the fence about boosting this week to bring in both. So I think picking one is probably good enough because I don't have enough rookies to trade out.
If I was just picking one, I'd pick Cleary, but I would implore you to boost and pick up both.
Yeah. Damo?
Yeah, Gross and Cleary are the ones that stand out. If El Hawley wasn't the starting sub in his first 2 games, then he'd probably be top of the list with his DPP, but I don't trust any of the Scott brothers anymore for anything. So as much as I love the guy, I am not going to pick Saad El Hawley, but he is good for culture. Good for culture.
And Sandy Brock is a key defender playing in somehow a team that is worse than Richmond. So
and Jeremy McGovern is a test to return this week anyway.
So very simply, do not pick.
Now, gentlemen, which rookies do you think people should be prioritizing getting rid of this week? Is there anyone who you think it's 100% time to go move on to the next one?
No. There's no one that's at 100% you have to trade this week. It's hard. I think this comes into your qualms around whether this really is the start of upgrade season or not, because a lot of these rookies are another pop score away from making, potentially another 50 to 100K. But a lot of these premiums have come down in price so much where if you actually have the ability to jump onto them by culling these rookies and getting the likes of pretty good rookies in Gross and Cleary, it might actually be time to cull them. All of the likes of Moraes, Davidson, Sardis if he's not back, even a Pryor could be players that you could look to trade out this week. It really just depends on who you think has got a little bit more cash to make, who you might want to be fielding, and how much cash they've actually got on their head to be able to get to the player that you might want to get to.
Expertly put. Speaking of notable primos to bring in, who is at the top of your wish list? So some of the notable primos this week that are quote unquote bottoming out: Max Gawn, Max Holmes, Sam Walsh, Isaac Heaney, all at incredibly low prices. Christian Petrarca, we spoke about, could drop even further if you wanted to hold out a week and get him when he plays Richmond and West Coast. Nick Dacos is also below 600k and has a break even of 121, which he could easily make, but he could also easily not make. So who is at the top of your shopping list this week?
I think I can go this one. Oh.
I have no idea what I'm doing with my team this week. We were talking about my trades before we hit record. Minnie was trying to help me. I'm indecisive, but there's a lot of players I can go for, and I've got a nice amount of money that I can spend. It's just a case of where it goes. I owned Sam Walsh last season and it was not fun. So I'm definitely not going there. Dacos's break even is 121. So there's a chance that he could even be cheaper again next week. But consensus seems to be that he's going to be a top midfielder from here and probably won't be this cheap again for a while.
Yeah, Nick Dacos has peaked. So, he's not going to get any better, guys. Now, Minnie, I purposely haven't spoken about your notable primo, so you can say it once again louder for the people in the back. Who's at the top of your shopping list this week?
Connor Rosie.
That's it.
I will make a quick point about Nick Dacos because people may have forgotten, but we have had a increase in the magic number. I can't remember which way it's gone. It changed one way such that 580k is actually closer towards the 605, 610k category as it was last year. So don't be fooled by that. He's still quite pricey. That being said, it is Nick Dacos. He was a top 5 midfielder last year, and I suspect he will be a top 5 midfielder again this year. And if you can get him at that price, I wouldn't begrudge you. There are a lot of good coaches and good teams out there in Supercoach this week that have had him as their number one priority. But I think when you can get someone who has been a popular starting pick at his price, and then he's come down in price because he's been a bit odd in his role and been tagged, and then has had a role shift and gone 130, that's a gift horse that you really don't want to look in the mouth. You really want to be considering getting him. So I think Connor Rosie is someone that if you don't own, would be right near the top of my list because of the combination on potential scoring, potential DPP, value for money, and potential ownership at, top ranks, top 5, top 10, top 20% of the competition.
Now, just before we all head on down to the fields where we keep all of the cruelty-free mail as it roams out free in the Mailbag Ranch paddocks, just some quick injury updates. Bontempelli is up for a fitness test this week, but could play against St Kilda quite reasonably. Harry Mackay is also in concussion protocols, which is just awful after the personal issues that he's gone through, and I'd like to probably take a quick moment just to acknowledge how fantastic it was for him to come out and speak about his mental health. Mental health is important for all people, whether they be AFL players, whether they be your everyday person. So make sure you're checking in with your friends, family, whoever it is, man, woman, child. Please look after each other because sometimes you don't know if someone just needs assistance to get to where they need to be. So thank you, Harry, for coming out and sharing your story with everyone. It's really, really fantastic that you have done that. Brody Kemp has ruptured his Achilles, which is danger signs for Tom de Koning, and Pitney is now available. Anything else we've missed, guys?
That's it. Let's get to the questions.
Put on your boots and come on down to the Mailbag Fields. Minnie, this is the first time you've been to the Mailbag Fields. Now we raise all these mail. They come in from every source that possible, and I'm running this metaphor into the ground until Damo physically turns off my mic in editing. Now, here at the Mailbag Ranch, we believe in cruelty-free mail. So make sure that you send us your mail before 8 p.m. Melbourne time on the Wednesday before the round. So 8 p.m. Melbourne time. I don't know what that is for you. I don't know where you live, which is a great thing for you.
Canberra, 8 p.m.
Yep, there you go. You can also now send us voice memos. The link is on our website right next to the question form. So if you want to do that, do that. That's great. You can verbalize it. Sometimes it's easier to verbalize than it is to write. I know I don't write good sometimes. But we'll start off with a question from Vinny. Vinny asks, forward rookies, Kako and Stone haven't really set the world on fire. Any other candidates that we should consider?
Caden Cleary.
Caden Cleary.
Caden Cleary.
But Isaac Kako has West Coast this week, so I'd move Stone before I move Kako.
Yeah, Kako's break even is quite low, isn't it, as well? It's in the 10s.
Break even is 15.
Yeah.
I wouldn't move either.
Okay.
Stone, you can tuck at D8, and defender forward flexibility will be a godsend through this next 10 weeks.
Okay. That's spicy. I love that. That's a great take. We have another bit of mail here from Corey. Corey says, hey, legends.
Sorry, Corey. Wait. Minnie, I got to ask a question then to you about this. If you could only move Kako or Stone, who are you keeping?
If I'm only keeping one, I need
Yes.
to check what price Kako and Stone are at. Give me 2 seconds. So Stone is at 172 and Kako is at 191. I'd probably move Kako.
Even with West Coast this week?
Even with West Coast this week.
Okay. All right. Interesting.
I'm not moving either.
We probably haven't helped Vinny at all here.
Well, hey, I would say Kako probably, because I also agree with DPP is a little bit better, and Kako's a small forward, which is a lot more volatile. Corey, back to your mail. We got, hey, legends, which option is better? Campo, Henderson, and Davidson to Dacos, Gross, and Cleary, leaving 14K in the bank, or Peyton, Henderson, Davidson to Merritt, Gross, and Cleary, leaving 5K in the bank. So essentially, we're getting rid of 2 dead rookies and Davidson in the first one, and we're getting rid of 2 dead rookies and Davidson in the second one, either getting Merritt or Dacos. I think Dacos.
Is it Merritt more expensive than Dacos?
Merritt
thought so.
610K, yeah.
Yeah.
I would do Payton, Henderson, and Davidson and get Dacos, Gross, and Cleary and have a little bit more in the bank.
Yeah, I agree.
So kind of a mix of the two.
Yeah.
All right, no notes from Damo. That's great.
Yep.
Moving on to Benji. Benji writes to us and asks, Roberts, Humphrey, and Davidson to Dacos, Petrarca, and Cleary. Tick this off, or should I hold track money and use that in the coming weeks for upgrades?
If holding the track money means keeping Matty Roberts, then definitely hold that money to use in coming weeks for future upgrades, because as we spoke about earlier, Matty Roberts is fine.
Yeah, this feels like a very sidewaysy kind of 2 half up, 1 down type trades, and I'm not really in favor of these types of trades at this time of the year. I'm more about getting really bad rookie scores off field, and this doesn't get a rookie score off field. You know, you're getting someone that's going to have to replace the Davidson F6, M8 type score. I would agree with Damo. If I would do Humphrey and Davidson to Dacos and Cleary, I think that's a tick, but I wouldn't do the Roberts to Petrarca move, I don't think.
I think it's easy for us all sometimes to think that a trade is such a clear upgrade based on form or based on a new piece of information that has come in that week. And I think this is probably just a great, not Benji specifically, this isn't, we're all guilty of it. I do it all the time. I'll have a look at a player and I go, hey, they seem really good. And then you look a little bit deeper and you're like, well, actually, how much better does this leave me off? So I think this is probably one of those cases where holding off on Petrarca probably leaves you a bit better off down the line, even if you don't end up getting him next week or whenever you decide to get him. Bringing in Dacos and Cleary for Humphrey and Davidson is a very clear upgrade. You're getting the cash generation and you're getting this points on field. I think it's just important to keep in mind when you are thinking of your trades to not just take this week into account, but to look at the whole picture and make sure that you're actually better off and not just better off last round. Damo, he's back. Nebulous Tim, parentheses Tim Prime has written this. So, Minnie, I don't know how much free time you have, but if you haven't listened to the Mailbag, Nebulous Tim is a collection of all the Tims who send us mail here at the Mailbag because they refuse to identify themselves as anything else. Therefore, there is a Nebulous Tim, but we have a mutation.
No. Mini Monk doesn't listen to the podcast because his name's not Tim.
That's fair. But this Tim has identified themselves as Tim Prime, the original Tim, if you will.
The leader.
Yes, the leader of the Nebulous Tim. Hi guys, part of Nebulous Tim here, but for simplicity, I'll be Tim Supreme or Tim Prime. Take your pick. I'm gonna go Tim Prime. I think that's fine. I've only used one boost for the year, and I'm sitting at about 11k overall. Great job. That's fantastic. Want to bring in 2 rookies this week, Cleary for Davidson and Gross for Henderson. I plan on boosting to upgrade one of my meh kids in Roberts or Callahan. Who would you prefer of the 2? I have money in the bank and could go to anyone. Was thinking Holmes or Sinclair for Roberts or Nick Dacos for Callahan. Thanks again for all your great work. Thanks, Tim Prime. We appreciate you. We kind of did talk about this a little bit earlier. Yeah. Where between the holding Roberts and yeeting Callahan, I think if I remember correctly, was the outcome of our what do we do with segment.
Yes. First 2 trades, fantastic. Callahan can go to Dacos.
Any notes from you, Damo?
As much as I like Finn Callahan, I can't argue with those trades.
It's funny. See, Tim Prime has come here and foiled you because he followed your rule of keeping Matt Roberts, but he got rid of Finn Callahan.
He didn't even know it was my rule. He could read my mind. Nebulous Tim has more power than we think.
Nebulous Tim is part of this show now. The Nebulous Tim is the Mailbag, the embodiment of all the hard work that we have put in. Thanks, Tim Prime. Jimmy has written to us and said, double downgrade this week to Cleary and Gross? Yes. Is it worth a boost to also get El Hawley? Or save boosts when needed and settle on the other 2? He's downgrading O'Driscoll because he didn't like Hall last week. Peyton, Cleary has his spot. Potentially Henderson or Stone if the boost is worth it. Holding O'Driscoll for a week was wild of you, Jimmy. With respect.
It wasn't. Again, different formats, different rules. I held O'Driscoll in AFL Fantasy last week to allow me to loop on scores, and I didn't end up looping scores, ended up getting the worst of the 3 scores that I could have looped on. So fantastic job. Well done, Brendan.
That's so funny, Minnie, because I did exactly the same thing, except I also had Will Day. And I
also had Will Day, and I traded Will Day, and I traded Sam DeConey, and I held Nathan O'Driscoll, and in the end, it didn't matter. I would not boost for Sardell Hooley. Unless he is named as not the sub, but even then, I probably still wouldn't boost him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you could probably be better served upgrading if possible, if you're going to boost, or saving the boost for down the line when your trade plans are a little bit more set. As we've said, keeping Stone seems to be something that is potentially attractive now that he's got defender forward.
Yeah.
Henderson plays for Melbourne, man.
Dropped, hopefully. Maybe.
Well,
who knows?
The thing is, Minnie, if they drop him, they might bring in someone crazy like Jack Billings again.
Oh, God.
Or anyone else who is not playing that well in the field. Damo is just like...
Judd McVee? Is Judd McVee back?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, maybe they'll be bringing Judd McVee.
Didn't he come back last week? Anyway, I'm not looking that up right now. So yeah, I hope that helps, Jimmy. Brad has written to us and said he's downgrading Davidson to Cleary and upgrading Nod. This gives me 563k to afford Rowell or Rosie. If I boost and go Henderson to Gross as well, I can afford a Dacos Anderson merit type. Is it worth the extra trade and boost? This will leave me with 30 trades and 2 boosts if I use 3. Gone from 40k ranked to 3.5k in the last 2 weeks. Hey, Brad, awesome work, mate. Let's take a second. That's a fantastic jump.
It's a huge jump.
We've already spoken about how much we love Connor Rosie this week, but
we have.
Let's talk about Matt Rowell. What do we think of Matt Rowell?
I mean, his break-even's in the mid-130s, but he does play Richmond this week. He could go above that break-even, but probably means his price won't move that much if you still want him next week. Whereas Connor Rosie, I don't know what his break even is. Mini might because he's been frothing over him all week, but
Top 100, I think.
But yeah, his price is not going to be under 500k for very much longer with that 137 that he scored against the Hawks. So I think Rosie is where you go in this scenario. And as soon as you read this question, this is literally this is my scenario this week. So I'm sitting here waiting for everyone else's answer.
So Rosie's break-even is 85 this week, which is significantly lower than 130. My question would be with regards to Raul is, do you see Raul as a top 8 midfielder when you compare him to the names like Dacos, Anderson, Merritt, and probably to a lesser extent with Rosie just because of the price difference? And I have a lot more confidence in those bigger dogs compared to Rosie. This is a really tricky one because I actually really like the boost option here, primarily because it gets rid of a rookie who is basically done in cash generation in Henderson and gets to a rookie that I think is going to make a lot of cash in Tom Gross. Just because you do the boost doesn't mean you have to spend all of the cash though. Of those options, I would probably rank them as Dacos first, Rosie second, Merritt third, Anderson fourth, Raul fifth.
I like it when we have a guest who just does the work for us. It's amazing. No notes. That's the perfect answer. And now, because Damo said the word dilemma, because the millennial that I am, I'm now just thinking of the Nelly and is it Kelly Rowland song Dilemma? Is that anyway? That's aged me very clearly.
You're telling me.
Yeah. This is everyone. This is how my brain works, and I am not a well man.
I listened to Rush. What the hell did you just do to our run sheet?
Let's see. Dilemma. What's the equivalent Rush song to Dilemma? Maybe Fly By Night is
Sure
is the equivalent. I have absolutely no measurements for this, and Minnie is just like, I regret everything. Nebulous Tim, another part of Nebulous Tim, has written in, and somehow they got a second pen. Hey lads, another dismal week Supercoach wise, but at least my footy team finds a way to win and we're on top. Son of a... Is it time to give up correcting our teams and play purely for upgrade cadence? I'd love to yeet Callahan, but using a trade to do so feels like a step sideways, while most will be stepping ahead. Thanks for the show, Neb Tim. Nebulous Tim, you're my favorite nebulous entity. I think we have spoken about upgrade season starting for some people. I don't think geeting Callahan to get to a sideways step makes a lot of sense unless it's a very specific sideways step.
Yeah, I think if your Supercoach team isn't going the way you'd like, but you have the ability to upgrade around him, I think that's the way to go, because sure, he might only be scoring in like the 80s and 90s at the moment, but he's got job security. We know what his role is going to be. There will be a game where he does go 100 plus. There might even be a period of time where he averages above 100 again. But I think upgrading around him and then waiting until your team is in a better shape before moving him on is probably the better thing to do. Just because what he's doing isn't terrible. It's just not what you paid for. And your team is probably going to be better off with him in the team and you upgrading around him to get those bad rookie scores off the field than moving him and keeping those 40s and 50s that you're going to get from a Kako or a Stone type. So I think upgrade around Callahan for now and just hope some form turns around in the meantime. But otherwise you can move him on later once your team's in better shape.
The upgrade cadence side of things is all about opportunity cost. It's what else could you be doing with your trades this week and potentially in the weeks to come. If moving Callahan still allows you to be able to stay on some sort of an upgrade cadence, then that's okay. But if you can't get to, an upgrade this week and you have to hold Callahan because of it, that's kind of fine. Like if holding Callahan still allows you to get some sort of upgrades rolling week after week and you found the week that eventually becomes the right time to move him, that's a perfectly reasonable way to trade for the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'm just looking around Callahan's price and just trying to figure out roughly how much the outlay would be to get him to someone cheap but meaningful, right?
It's 80K.
Yeah,
80K.
Petrarca, and how much to Connor Rosie, sorry?
82K.
Yeah, 82K. There you go. Still side bottom is also just cheaper than Connor Rosie. If Adam Chera
Is still side bottom going to be your Harry Mackay this year?
Maybe.
Oh my!
I like him. He's just neat. He's playing really well off halfback for a man who's 80.
Is he just playing off halfback? I thought he was playing CBA midfielder on the weekend.
I didn't see that. Josh Dacos is also 449, who
He is.
he's only going to get cheaper.
Still, Sidebottom had 53% of CBAs on Friday against Sydney.
Shit.
Yeah.
I thought I was seeing him a lot because how can you not? But I thought that was just because he's so shiny.
He had almost as many CBAs as Scott Pendlebury.
I bet still Sidebottom's played at more venues than Scott Pendlebury.
Moving on.
Anyway, yeah. Thanks, Neb Tim. That's all the questions we have for this week, Damo.
Thanks everyone for your questions.
Now, listeners, I know what your biggest question this week is. It's not on the run sheet because we already know. We didn't need anyone to send it in. Has the curse of Ron been lifted for this week's traffic lights?
To fill people in who don't know, we obviously post the traffic lights on our socials and on our website on Thursdays.
And boy, do you let us know if it's not on time.
But yep, and for the first few weeks, that first midfield square was cursed. Every player we put in that square would either get injured, dropped, or suspended. So we have omitted it from the last two traffic lights, hoping to rid this curse. Last week you were treated to a beautiful picture of Adelaide Oval. Is the first midfield square ever going to return? To be confirmed.
It's up to you listeners to decide whether we just couldn't be bothered doing an extra midfielder square or whether we thought the curse of Ron was just this funny. I think it's this funny, but it'll return soon. We hopefully have exorcised the demons.
This place is clear now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you hex someone that I don't own?
Oh, we've been asked.
Yeah.
The thing is, because it's not we didn't put this curse on that square, so we don't know how it exactly works. We don't want to put someone there and then it doesn't work because that will make people even more mad.
Tell you what, if you buy a shirt, we'll consider cursing a player of your choice.
That's tempting. Very, very tempting.
Not you specifically, Minnie. You get one for free because you're giving us your time. Keep a lookout for our traffic lights, though, across the social medias and the websites. They are a guide where we grade each player. We grade players every week. They get a green, yellow, or red rating. Green is good. Yellow is a watch or hold, and red is a trade or avoid. As Damo mentioned, we post them usually on Thursdays and then update them on Fridays as more teams are announced. Obviously, this week is the Easter roster, so we may not know Monday teams, so we may require an additional update, Damo. I don't remember how it works with naming the Easter Monday game.
As far as I'm aware with my planning, I'm not including any Geelong Hawthorn players this week, so not needed. But if I need to do an update on Saturday, I will.
Yeah, or if we're paid enough to do a curse on one of them.
So you might not need a second, but a third coming of the traffic lights.
Yes.
Something's going to be coming over the weekend, that's for sure.
What the fuck, Dave? Anyway, a player earns their rating for several reasons, including but not limited to 2, scoring potential, job security, price point, reliability, or injury status. It's posted. That's already. I've got a full script for this, and I went off script, and Damo is done. Damo, we need to cut Damo from the show. Cancel him. He's done. This is it. This is it. Hey, so this is the part of the show where we talk about captains and vice captains. Minnie, it's just you and I now. The sensible ones. Just Damo's. Anyway. Last week, I don't want to pat myself on the back because Supercoach is meant to be fun. People take this very seriously, and it can get quite negative when You talk about Supercoach with people when you engage with people online. So it's important to take moments to celebrate each other and celebrate yourself when you get something right. Holy crap. I put the captain on Andy Brayshaw last week and dividends.
Yum.
Absolutely saved my bacon last week.
That was delicious.
I played Pryor on field instead of trainer, and I was like, I have done everything wrong this week. I have done everything
the redemption
wrong.
On the Sunday.
That's it.
It's always nice when you get the captaincy on the highest scoring player for the week.
That's it.
That's fantastic.
It's so good. So, hey, listeners, if you nail a captain, celebrate yourself. Go buy a bottle of champagne. Or if you don't drink, hey, go buy yourself some of those Cinnabon hot cross buns from Woolworths while you can. They're absolutely delicious. If you can find them, they're nothing else. They're new hot cross bun technology. Go and treat yourself to one of them. Damo, who is your vice captain for this week?
I think my looping options limited this week. So my vice captain is Tristan Sherry.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think on Good Friday, hopefully his hamstring is okay and he doesn't get subbed for the last half of the final quarter.
Sounds good. Minnie, who's your vice captain for this week?
I actually don't know yet because I don't know what my loophole options are going to look like. I'm concerned that Harry Boyd plays this week. If he doesn't, my vice captain will be Andrew Brayshaw.
I genuinely have the same problem. He is the only person I have who is potentially definitely not playing up until today. Up until this week where I'm like, oh no, this could be the week. He's been traveling with the team lately. He's been getting all buddy with them. And I say, Harry, why don't you think of us, the little guy, for once?
I've just realized I don't think I can do that vice captain of Tristan Sherry. So I might need to go with Lockie Neal on Thursday night.
There you go. Lockie Neal
against first.
Collingwood.
Lockie Neal 160.
Lock it in. Curse of Ron lifted. My vice captain choice, depending on loophole, I'm actually looking at who do I like. I usually vibes base it, and I really like Lockie Whitfield. He coming up against Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval. GWS are just sort of flying. He had probably an unfavourable ground for his style of play, and it seemed like Ross Lyon last week was just tagging 8 different GWS players, or at least having his players run with them. So an 86, I think, is kind of an outlier for a guy who's having just a fantastic season so far. Just been an interesting one. So vice captain Lockie Whitfield, and we'll see how we go from there. Damo, who's your captain?
Andy Brayshaw.
Excellent. Minnie, who's your captain?
My captain is currently Jack Sinclair. If Harry Boyd is potentially in, my captain will be Andy Brayshaw.
Excellent. And my captain is also currently on Andy Brayshaw. As much as I want to include Gawn in my VC or C, I just can't hurt myself twice in one day if I'm going to the football.
Quick one. You are aware that GWS play after Fremantle, right?
I am now. Yeah, just reverse it. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Remember to check your phone as you're walking away from the MCG at halftime.
Why am I, the list that I'm looking at, the games are out of order, and I've just noticed that. Anyway, sorry about that, folks. Anyway, just reverse that. I'll just put the VC on Andy Brayshaw, and then the C on Whitfield if that's not working out. Easy.
It's busy.
Minnie, thank you so much for joining us this week. We appreciate you putting up with our nonsense for over an hour of great content, only improved by your presence. Where can people find more of you?
Weekly podcast with MJ. We drop on a Tuesday night into Wednesday morning and we chat both AFL Fantasy and Supercoach in kind of the one podcast. And I'm on Twitter at Minimog10.
Absolutely. The round tables, the round tables, fantastic listens every week. They're a must listen to me. We love the work that you guys do over the coaches panel, and it's such an all-inclusive and very holistic look at all the fantasy formats. So I think I appreciate that a lot because you guys do a lot of analysis that's not just specifically based on format, it's based on the footy, which is super interesting.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on here, and I look forward to catching up with you guys every now and then on here as well.
And hey, Damo.
Hey.
Are you good?
I think
Yeah?
I think I'm good.
Yeah, cool. So, Damon, where can people find more of you?
At Damo SC on Twitter, at an underscore after that for Instagram.
Excellent. And you can find me over at Quantum JC, or you can also check out my other podcast at Falcon Footy Pod. The Falcon, we do weekly episodes with my good friends Jesse, Chris, and Cass. This week, Cass is the Freo supporter I have to have one on every podcast apparently. So I might be bullied twice next week, which is not what you want. But hey, listeners, most importantly, go and follow the Footy Mailbag. So you can find us at the Footy Mailbag on pretty much all social medias. It says pretty much in the little script here, but I don't know what the outlier to that might be. If you haven't given us a rating though on your podcast platform of choice, please do so. It helps us get into people's ears and people's algorithms and their suggestions. But the best thing that you could do is to just straight up recommend us. If you have somebody who is struggling with their Supercoach team, if you have someone who's asking you a question about Supercoach that you don't know, hey, send them on over to us. Tell them that they can ask us any questions. We're legally obligated to take all of the mail into the ranch. So you can also send them to our website. This is getting longer and longer, this plug every week. thefootymailbag.net, which is our podcast feed for merch, for written content occasionally. Our traffic lights are also put up on there and links to all of our socials, and also the fancy new voice memo thing. So you can also leave us a voice note if you want. If you don't want to write your question, speak it.
Eventually, the ending is going to be longer than the rest of the podcast.
Well, it's definitely the most coherent part of the podcast.
True.
Except for when Mini talked this week.
Also
anyway,
true.
Thanks, listeners. We'll see you next week. Good luck. Hey, good luck this week. You'll do great. I know you will. You listen to us.